Of 50 guys that I had on the team one year, only 5 of them lived in a mother and father home. You're talking almost 90% of the kids that we had. Well, we had a couple of kids that, talking about food, that they've just ate all the time because they had that syndrome that they didn't know if they'd ever get another meal. The thing we did when we showed films on the weekend is we'd cook sausages, make sausage wraps while we were watching the film to make sure that they had a breakfast. And in the course of a day, a child could burn anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 calories just out of practice. Each time we had a challenge, we had to come up with a solution.
All right. Good afternoon. Welcome again to Table Talks here at Shepherd's Heart, where we come together with different folks from around the community that are invested in Waco. And today we're having a conversation with Coach Johnny Tusa. Doesn't need a whole lot of introduction to most Wacoans, but it's a real honor and privilege to have you here, Coach.
Well, it's my privilege to be here, and I appreciate you having me.
Now you've been in Waco a long time.
I have.
Were you born and raised here?
I was not born here, but I got here as quickly as I could. I was probably maybe 2 years old, I think, when we moved here. I was born in Houston. My older brother and I were both born in Houston. And my dad was in Houston to become a welder it was right after the war. And he ended up in the grocery business there. And he and his brother collaborated a little bit about getting in the grocery business. And they were raised in the Brazos Bottoms there around Marlin. There's a little community called High Bank, and it was a community of about 250 immigrated Italian families, and most of them were sharecroppers on land. And so they were raised in that environment. My dad was one of 11 children, and two were not able to get out of the early stages of their life. So there was three boys and 6 girls that my grandmother pretty much raised by herself.
Wow. And you were telling me earlier they were in the grocery business.
That's
and
correct.
You mentioned that just now. Different grocery stores here in town, and it sparked a memory. Growing up here in Waco,
right.
I remember Tusa's Grocery.
Yes, and there were several of them. My dad's grocery store was over in East Waco, and he operated that for many, many years there as an independent grocerman. It's kind of as a mom and pop operation, as they're better known in these days and times. But that was a good learning experience for me and my brothers, and we were reluctant workers because we would rather be playing or doing something else on Saturday. But Dad was a hard worker. His exemplary behavior concerning work was of much benefit to me and my brothers. My mother was a prayer warrior. She was a housewife, and she helped when she could, but a very fervent religious person, and just loved Jesus. And we were raised as Catholics in a Catholic school, and we had a prayerful life growing up, and and then as we branched out, we were able to take that we learned as children and turn it into careers. And I chose the sports end of that because that was a hobby for me.
Yeah.
And I loved being around sports and playing when I was young, and so on and so forth. I played college football at Tarleton State, and I played a year of baseball there also in college. And so it was natural for me to get into the coaching business, especially since I had such a connection to my high school coach, who had a tremendous influence on me, and one of my college coaches had a tremendous influence on me. And as growing up, you want to be like them. And
yeah.
That's how I got started.
And we were talking just a few minutes before, and just the impact coaches have on the lives of young men. And I'm sure you've seen a number of young men come through your programs that if it weren't for sports, probably would not be around today or would have a very different life than they do.
No question about it. Sports was their release, their opportunity, their panacea for the day. And just, I realized at a very, very early in my career that these guys needed the sport to balance their lives. And many of them came from poverty. Many of them came from single-parent homes. They had different circumstances. Some were foster children. So we had a collection of young people who had come from a lot of backgrounds, and many of those backgrounds were not economically favorable to them. So there again, it was incumbent upon us to know who they were, to know what their needs were. But by coaching them and them being on a team and learning about teamwork, learning how to become a good sportsman, how to not be narcissistic with what they did, but fit into a group. All these things were. I learned that at a very early age that was going to be important if I was going to be able to stay in the business and be successful. I didn't measure success on that scoreboard. Success was in the number of lives that you could move on, transform, and allow them to become productive citizens in this society.
I love it. We were walking through the pantry a few minutes ago, and you surprised me with the statistic that most people are surprised when I give to them.
Right.
And that's the poverty rate here in Waco, that 1 out of every 2.
Right.
We're about twice the national average.
Right.
In the poverty rate here.
Yeah.
And that's something we want to do something about.
Absolutely.
Can you kind of highlight some of the things you saw with young men that would come in and that you knew they had a talent, but you needed to work with them?
Yeah. Of course, there's a lot of examples that I could cite. I remember one time vividly, Howard, we had an end of the year banquet over at Lions Den, which was across the street from
Right.
Waco High. And I spent 23 years coaching at Waco High, and that's where I ended my career. There were 50 names on that roster, and I would go through each individual, call them up to the front, get a letter jacket, maybe all district. We always gave their GPA because we were very proud of the fact that the guys on our team, most of them did better than average in the classroom because they had something, we had something that they wanted, and the state had a requirement for them to be on the team. But to get back to my point, of 50 guys that I had on the team one year, only 5 of them lived in a mother and father home.
Wow.
So you're talking almost 90% of the kids that we had that particular year. And I didn't check it every year, but that year stuck out to me because I think it was probably statistically the worst that I had seen. So that pushed me forward to want to make sure that we knew not only about that person's athletic ability, but we knew his background. So one of the things we did prior to the season is everybody that was going to be on our varsity, either me or one of our assistants visited their home. We wanted to see who was in the home, who was in charge, what the circumstances looked like, so that we could better serve that child and his needs. Transportation was always an issue. Weekend film viewing was always an issue. We had to, sometimes we had to collectively get together and get rides for some of these kids. Some of them had their own transportation. Some of them had a bicycle or whatever. But we had to make sure they could get to where they needed to be because, as you know, our business was 7 days a week. We played on Friday. You got film work on Saturday. We go to church on Sunday. Then after church, we'd gather again to get a game plan for the next week because not only do our coaches coach, but they taught in the classroom. And I had to be cognizant of that. they've got families, they've got young children. So there were a lot of dynamics that had to be taken into consideration. But just an example, we had a couple of kids that, talking about food, that they just ate all the time because they had that syndrome that they didn't know if they'd ever get another meal. So,
Right.
And a couple of those were foster children. And we had to work with them to make sure that they weren't afraid anymore that there wasn't going to be another meal for them. We had many on the weekend. The thing we did when we showed films on the weekend is we got with HEB and we had a barbecue pit, and we'd cook sausages, make sausage wraps while we were watching the film to make sure that they had a breakfast. And of course, we had after practice, the cafeteria would give us milk, peanut butter sandwiches, and so on and so forth. But we tried to make sure that they were as nutritionally fed because of the number of calories they burned. In the course of a day, a child could burn anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 calories just out of practice. And so the challenge was there. And each time we had a challenge, we had to come up with a solution. And I am proud of the fact that many of the kids that have left the program and have come back, they recalled they didn't recall scores, wins, or losses. They recalled how they were treated, the contacts that they were able to make. Many have become preachers. We've got investment bankers. We've got kids out there that have gone on to do great things, and many of them came from poverty. So it's heartwarming for me to go into HEB or around town, and of course I have to ask them their name after 40 years, and they look a little different.
You've probably coached a few. There's probably a million names in your Rolodex.
There's at least that, but always just so proud to see them. Ask them what they're doing, how's their family, and I never try to fail to leave them without telling them that I love them and I appreciate what they did. They are a part of me, more so than I'm probably a part of them. And for me to be able to have served those children, and then they come back and say thank you. They don't really like you when you're running wind sprints and making them do this or that, but they all realize that all that was done out of love. If you're doing it out of anything else, you're missing the mark. And but it has been, God has blessed me immensely for putting people in my life, and I'm sure you can probably say the same, that have made a difference in how I go about doing the things that I do. I try to serve on a daily basis, and I try to make somebody's life, at least one person's life, better every day by a kind word, a kind action, open the door, get their grocery cart at the store, whatever, but just to do something to make somebody have somebody care about them at least one time during that day.
Coach, you fit right in here with the culture of what we're wanting to do, not just throw food at a problem,
Right.
where hunger is certainly a problem. Sure. And I'm sure food would be gladly received, but so much more than that.
Absolutely.
Is to touch the life that's affected by hunger. Hunger is almost an invisible condition. Mm-hmm. But I bet you saw it pretty regular when it walked in the locker room, affecting attitudes, affecting performance. And so we're wanting to do the same thing, and not just throwing money at a problem or throwing food at a problem, but really addressing the human need for connection. Mm-hmm. And I'm so encouraged, and I knew this about you without even knowing the stories, just because I've seen the fruit from a distance, and what a blessing. When a young man would come in and would maybe had a chip on his shoulder or was a little upset, did you ever just think, I wonder if he's hungry? Mm-hmm. I wonder if he's eaten today.
Right.
Yeah. How did it show in the locker room?
Well, of course, we had there were kids sometimes we couldn't reach.
Yeah.
They were incorrigible for whatever reason, and I'd sometimes get them in there with their mother or whoever, and we would talk about things, and I'd ask them questions. I'd say, Billy, whatever your name, Billy, who purchased those shoes for you? My mom. I said, well, how about those jeans you got? How'd you get those? My mom. I said, so the way you repay your mom is by not being respectful, not doing what you need to do, and making life hard for her. And the food, same thing. Who fed you this morning? My mom. How did she get that food? She worked at night or whatever. I said, then how do you repay that? Right now you're in school and you don't have a job, but you repay her or whomever by helping and watching and learning how to serve. And the food part usually we addressed because we were able to, of course, they ate breakfast and lunch at school. They came to us for a practice. We'd be, of course, they had water during practice and so on and so forth. But afterwards, there were drinks available, there were snacks available, and so on and so forth. I'd venture to say when they were with us, Howard, that they didn't have a hunger issue simply because they were with us 5 or 6 days out of the week, and we were able to provide 75% of their nutrition either through the school or through the athletic program. So for that part, we were blessed to have that. Now, when it came to an off-season deal where there weren't games and they weren't involved, of course, we would put them through an off-season program, a weightlifting program. We try to see to it that and the WISD cafeteria food program through Cliff Reese and those people, they did a phenomenal job of identifying, having fruit available, having, like I said, sandwiches available, so on and so forth afterwards. And that program has grown exponentially through the years. To my knowledge, it's bigger now than it's ever been. And some of these kids are being able to get stuff on the weekend. And I know you guys step in the gap with a lot of people, school age or not. And but basically, you try. I think we try to do the same thing that you guys are doing, and probably vice versa.
Yeah. So there's a lot of businesses, there are a lot of places that may not recognize what coaches and teachers face. How do we get that message to them? How do we get that word out?
Well, yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know how you do that on a large scale without you guys identify a specific problem every day. We have more than. I think it's fair for me to say that the public school system has more than just a hunger problem. There are many areas that need to be addressed. The behavior problem, possibly a drug problem, so on and so forth. But to get the word out, I think you got to put the word out that within our community there are many services that need to be expanded and I guess incorporated in school systems to address several issues. Hunger being one of them, obviously.
Right.
Possibly mental illness, possibly drug abuse or family abuse. There are a lot of things that we tried to look at. And one of the things we tried to do, Howard, is not on when we had a child, we wanted to know how's your day going? How are things in your family? We weren't trying to pry, but we wanted them to know that we're concerned about you. Yeah, it's fine that you play and you're really good or you're whatever, but we're more concerned about what happens to you over the long haul, what happens to you when you leave us, what happens to you the next day, so on and so forth. So, that's probably something that can be researched, how you get the word out. There is a lot that goes on in this community. There are a lot of good programs. There are a lot of good people that want to help. You've got all kinds of ways of communicating with people nowadays, but having an idea is one thing, following through with it is another. And, that probably takes manpower, man hours, so on and so forth. But, if there was ever a talking committee about that, I'd sure be glad to listen to what people had to say about that,
Well, part of what we're wanting to do with this podcast is to get the word out.
Yeah.
And not just about hunger, because you're absolutely right. We're not just a stomach, we're a whole body. And,
That's exactly right.
There's a whole lot involved, and there are a lot of great groups that do a lot of great things. And there are a lot of people with resources that don't know. And you don't open up the sports section and look at the box scores to see, okay, here's the stats for home incomes and things like that. So you look for the scores, but those scores are produced out of home lives and things, and we have a chance to make a difference in this community.
Absolutely.
Now, you're also involved in FCA. That's a powerful group that's also riding on the lives of young people.
Right. Yeah, I became involved with them as a coach. The theory of the three-legged stool, mind, body, and spirit. If one of those legs is shorter than the other, the stool falls over. I'm going to spit that one out. I had become the head coach at Jefferson Moore High School back in 1979, and it was a program that hadn't been winning, and in the first couple of years, I didn't do much to change that, and we were on like a 30 or 34 game losing streak. So that after that second year there, and after I knew that either you turn this program around. One thing about coaches, you got 2 or 3 years, and then somebody takes your place.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I called. I heard about the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. They had a chapter there at Baylor. Didn't know much about it, and so I called, and they put me in touch with one of the assistant coaches there, Bill Lane, who was one of Grant Taft's assistants at the time. And I told him that I was interested in starting a huddle, a Fellowship of Christian Athletes huddle, a Bible study. Well, he sent me Wes Geary, who was a chaplain over there at the time, and Cody Carlson, who was a quarterback. Cody still lives in this area, and he played for Baylor, ended up playing in Houston professionally. And they came, and we had a gathering of kids that we began a weekly Bible study, and they'd come once a week. And lo and behold, as the Lord would have it, that third year, we turned that program around and won the district championship. And the rest is history. Now, I'm not saying God cares anything about football, but he does care about the people that play the game.
That's exactly right.
I do know that it was nothing short of a miracle for us to come from 0-10 to the next year winning the district championship. And back in those days, you only took one team to the playoffs. Now they'll take 3 or 4. But and that turned my professional career around, and it also taught me a lot about the spirit, continuing the spiritual side with these kids. And we ended up, when I went to Waco High, we ended up having Bible study on our back patio, and we'd get 30 or 40 kids on a Wednesday night. 2 things: if you'll serve food, as you well know, and if you have young ladies that come to the program, the young men like to come to that too. So we figured that out in our Bible study. But it doesn't matter how you get them there. It matters when they get there, what you feed them with. And I'm not talking about solid food. I'm talking about spiritual food, even though we did both. And, so I've been involved with that program for over 40 years. And when I stopped coaching, and I became the AD from 2013 to 2020, and I fully retired in 2020. So the last 2.5 to 3 years, I've worked as a part-time ambassador for the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. And basically, I go around and talk to coaches that that are doing what I did, and we just if I can help them with their job, we try to help them spiritually first and foremost, and then you won't talk about anything else. They have families, they have issues, they have problems. I can't tell you how many, when they're in communities, they get it from nine ways from Sunday coming at them, and it's they just got to know that they're in God's hands, and He's in charge. And there's no matter what people think or say, you do what you can do, and you turn the noise off. I never took the newspaper. I never listened to sportscasts because all that was a distraction. They're going to tell you how bad you are or who you're supposed to beat. Well, I didn't need that. I had plenty on my plate. I have nothing against all those things, but for me, the less distractions that I had in doing my job, the better I felt like I could do it, and with an uncluttered mind. I was one that got deep in the weeds and wanted to come up with every trick that I could to help us win a ball game, even though that was not the end all of everything. It was what I was supposed to be doing, and so we dove in that. We dove into that 90 miles an hour, and when I put my whistle up in 2009, my tank was empty, and for 38 years I did what I could do. But I've been able to transition into other areas since that have been just as satisfying. Now, there's nothing like the competition, nothing like winning, nothing like losing either.
Yeah.
But you run that gamut. But I have enjoyed being able to continue in the sports capacity and bring Christ to as many people as I possibly can.
I love it, Coach. Like I said, I've known you from a distance for a long time, and that's certainly the testimony that your life is, that you've written on the lives of people, on the lives of young men, that has made a difference in this world. And appreciate you taking some time to talk with us today. Now, you told one story that was funny that while we were walking through that, and go back to your dad being the grocer, that he worked 364 days a year, only took Christmas Day off, and you didn't want a job that busy, so you went into coaching.
Yeah, I was going to get one of those jobs. I thought that was 9 to 5. Yeah. It might have been 9 to 5, but going in both directions. And no, I had an older brother. We laugh about it from time to time. Well, we're never going to do what Dad did and so forth. But he ended up doing being in the FBI and doing some other things. But I ended up coaching, and I found out that it starts around 6:30 or 7 in the morning. I never got home, even during, when it wasn't game time. We practiced till 5:30, 6 o'clock. By the time you got everybody out of there, planned for the next day at 7 or 7:30. So I always ate out of the microwave, and for all those years. But yeah, I said I wasn't going to spend that many hours, and I spent more than that. So, but it was my hobby, and I look back on my dad, and I'm sure that running a grocery store was his hobby. And you just you dive in and do what God gives you the ability to do. Everybody's got a gift, Howard. You just have to find out what that is. And I think I probably told you the story about me cutting that chicken for the first time when my dad was around. A lady asked me to cut up a chicken, and I got to hacking at that thing. I came up with 15 or 16 pieces. I think there's only supposed to be 8, but she took it home. I guess she thought she got a bonus. She had way more chicken pieces there than you could imagine. But we laugh about that all the time. That was one of the funny things that happen when you're growing up and you're learning and experiencing. And when you run a family business, everybody jumps in there and does what they can do. And my dad reminded us all the time they put a roof over our head and food on the table. And so when we'd asked about getting paid, that usually wasn't an option. The pay was the roof and the food and the clothes and what have you. But it was a wonderful upbringing. I'm totally blessed by what I was able to experience and go through and have the kind of family that I did, and just thankful to God that it turned out the way it did.
Absolutely. Coach, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. And I just want to say I appreciate what you guys do. You're doing great work in this community. Our prayers are with you each and every day, and just keep on keeping on.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
You're welcome.